If I could place just one quiet thought into your heart today, it would be this. The hardest battles of growing older are not always the ones happening inside our bodies. I have watched people with strong legs become prisoners of restless minds, while others carrying aching joints still smiled with a peace that seemed impossible to explain. For many years, I wondered why that happened, and only after living more than 90 years did I begin to understand something that changed the way I greeted every new morning. What surprised me most was not that difficult people existed, or that life could be unfair, but that so much of my own suffering came from the stories I kept telling myself long after the moment had already passed. I wish someone had whispered this to me when I was much younger, because it might have saved me countless sleepless nights. Throughout my life, I noticed that the same unpleasant event could leave one person calm and another deeply wounded for weeks. I often asked myself what invisible difference separated them. At first, I believed it was luck. Later, I blamed personality. But after watching neighbors, relatives, friends, and even strangers from different countries, I slowly realized that the answer was much quieter than I had imagined. It was hidden inside the small space between what happened and how each person chose to respond. I did not discover this lesson in a book, and I certainly did not learn it from a famous expert. I learned it by making the same mistake over and over again until I grew tired of carrying burdens that no one else could even see. There was a time when one careless word could spoil my entire day. If someone looked at me with a serious face, I immediately believed I had done something wrong. If a family member forgot to call, my mind invented painful explanations before sunset. Looking back now, I smile gently at that younger version of myself because she truly believed every silence was rejection and every disagreement was a personal attack. The strange part is that none of those thoughts made life safer. They only made life heavier. As the years passed, I began noticing something remarkable among the oldest people I met. They still faced disappointment, loss, and misunderstanding, yet they seemed to protect an inner place that the outside world could not easily disturb. I spent decades wondering how they managed to keep that quiet strength alive, and when I finally understood the first piece of their secret, it changed far more than my mood. It changed the way I looked at every difficult conversation, every disappointment, and every ordinary day. But before I tell you what opened my eyes, I want to share the unexpected meeting that first made me question everything I believed about stress and peace. For many years, I believed that growing older simply meant learning to endure more pain, more disappointment, and more worry. Then, one afternoon when I was already well into my 70s, something happened that quietly changed the direction of the rest of my life. I had traveled to visit a cousin who lived in a small village where people seemed to move through their days without the constant hurry I had grown used to. I noticed that the oldest woman in the neighborhood, who was nearly 100 years old, laughed easily, greeted everyone with kindness, and never appeared rushed, even when unexpected problems arrived. One morning I saw a neighbor speak sharply to her over a misunderstanding that was not even her fault. I waited for her to defend herself, to argue, or at least to look offended. Instead, she listened without interrupting, smiled gently, wished the woman a peaceful day, and continued watering her flowers. I could not stop thinking about what I had witnessed. Later that afternoon, I asked her how she managed to stay so calm when someone had treated her unfairly. She looked at me with warm eyes and said something so simple that I almost dismissed it. She told me that every person carries an invisible basket filled with their own fears, disappointments, and worries, and sometimes they accidentally empty that basket onto someone standing nearby. If you pick up what falls out, she said softly, you will spend your whole life carrying weight that never belonged to you. Those words followed me home like quiet companions. At first, I did not fully understand them. I still caught myself replaying uncomfortable conversations before going to sleep. I still imagined what I should have said differently. But little by little, I began paying closer attention to the people around me. Throughout my life, I noticed that those who reacted with the greatest anger were often quietly exhausted. Those who criticized others the most frequently struggled to be kind to themselves. Many older people I admired seemed to understand this without needing to explain it. They did not excuse hurtful behavior, but they also refused to let another person's bad day become their own burden. That realization gave me hope because it meant peace was not something reserved for lucky people. It was something that could be practiced, one ordinary moment at a time. Still, there was another lesson I had not yet learned, and once I discovered it, I finally understood why silence can sometimes be far stronger than the cleverest argument. After that visit, I started watching people more carefully than I ever had before. I was no longer looking at how successful they appeared or how many years they had lived. Instead, I found myself paying attention to the small moments that most people never notice. I watched how they reacted when plans changed, when someone disagreed with them, or when life refused to follow the path they expected. Throughout my life, I noticed that the people who remained active and joyful into their later years often shared one quiet habit. They rarely rushed to answer while their emotions were still speaking louder than their wisdom. At first, I thought they were simply slow to respond because of age. One day, I finally understood that their silence was not weakness at all. It was a choice. It gave their minds enough time to separate facts from feelings before saying words they might later regret. I remember an old gentleman I met during a family gathering many years ago. A younger relative challenged almost everything he said, hoping to start an argument. Everyone around the table became uncomfortable, expecting the evening to end badly. Yet the old man simply smiled, took a slow sip of tea, and changed the conversation by asking about the young man's children. Later, when I asked why he had not defended himself, he answered with a gentle laugh. He said that not every invitation deserves to be accepted, especially an invitation to conflict. Those words stayed with me because I realized how often I had accepted such invitations without even noticing. Someone else's frustration became my frustration. Someone else's anger became my burden. Researchers continue studying how long-term stress affects the body, and many older people believe that protecting inner peace is just as important as choosing wholesome food or taking a daily walk. I cannot explain it with scientific language, and I am not a doctor, but I can tell you what I have seen with my own eyes. The people who learned to pause before reacting often seemed lighter, slept more peacefully, and smiled more sincerely than those who carried every disagreement home with them. That does not mean they never felt hurt. They certainly did. The difference was that they refused to let one difficult moment become the story of the entire day. As I practiced doing the same, I slowly noticed that my heart felt calmer. My conversations became kinder, and even my family seemed more relaxed around me. Still, another lesson was waiting for me, one that taught me the surprising difference between feeling an emotion and allowing that emotion to make every decision in my life. The longer I lived, the more I realized that most of us do not lose our peace all at once. We give it away a little at a time without even noticing. I used to think the biggest mistakes people made were loud and obvious, but I was wrong. The ones that hurt us most are often quiet habits we repeat every single day. One of mine was believing that every uncomfortable moment required an immediate response. If someone misunderstood me, I wanted to explain myself right away. If someone criticized me, I felt I had to defend every detail. I believed silence meant weakness. Yet throughout my life, I noticed that many of the wisest older people did exactly the opposite. They allowed time to pass before deciding whether anything needed to be said at all. At first, I could not understand how that helped. Then one day, I finally understood that many problems become much smaller simply because we stop feeding them with our attention. Another mistake I made for many years was trying to change people who had no desire to change themselves. I spent precious energy searching for the perfect words that would make someone more patient, more grateful, or more understanding. Sometimes I succeeded for a day or two, but lasting change never came because it was never mine to create. That lesson was difficult to accept, yet it became one of the greatest sources of freedom I have ever known. Instead of asking, "How can I change this person?" I slowly learned to ask, "How can I protect my own peace while treating this person with kindness?" Those two questions may sound similar, but they lead to completely different lives. Many people believe stress comes only from difficult situations, but I often wondered whether much of it comes from refusing to let those situations end. We replay conversations while washing dishes. We imagine arguments while trying to fall asleep. We carry yesterday into tomorrow without realizing how heavy it has become. Researchers continue studying the effects of chronic stress, and many older people believe that choosing where to place our attention each day may support both emotional and physical well being. I cannot prove that from a laboratory, but I have watched enough lives to know that constant worry rarely solves the problem it keeps revisiting. As I began letting go of unnecessary battles, I discovered that protecting my energy did not make me cold or indifferent. It made me more present for the people who truly mattered. Still, there was one final habit I had to understand before everything began to fit together, and it was far simpler than I ever expected. As the decades passed, I began noticing something that surprised me more than any clever piece of advice I had ever heard. The happiest older people I met were not the ones who had escaped hardship. In truth, many of them had buried loved ones, faced financial struggles, survived illness, and watched the world change in ways they never expected. What made them different was not the absence of pain, but the quiet habits they practiced every ordinary day. Throughout my life, I noticed that they guarded their attention as carefully as a gardener protects young flowers. They did not allow every headline, every criticism, or every passing opinion to enter their hearts and remain there. I remember visiting an elderly friend who always seemed peaceful, no matter what was happening around her. One afternoon, I asked how she managed to stay so cheerful. She smiled and pointed toward the window, where birds were gathering near a small feeder. "Do you see them?" she asked. "Some stay only a moment, and others build nests. Thoughts are the same. You cannot stop every thought from arriving, but you can decide which ones are welcome to stay." I carried those words with me for years. Little by little, I stopped treating every fearful thought as if it were a prediction of the future. Instead, I learned to observe it, breathe, and ask myself whether it truly deserved a place in my day. That simple question changed more than I expected. I also noticed another habit shared by many people who remained active and independent well into their later years. They found small reasons to feel grateful, even on difficult days. Gratitude did not erase their problems, nor did it pretend life was perfect. It simply reminded them that one disappointment did not cancel every blessing. Some mornings I began thanking life for the warmth of my tea, the song of a bird outside my window, or the chance to call someone I loved. Those moments seemed tiny, yet together they slowly changed the direction of my thoughts. Researchers continue studying how gratitude and positive daily routines may support emotional well-being, and many older people believe these quiet practices help reduce the weight of everyday stress. I cannot explain exactly how it works, but I know how it felt inside my own heart. I became less interested in proving that I was right, and far more interested in protecting the peace that allowed me to enjoy the people I loved. Still, one final lesson remained, and it was the one that finally showed me how these simple ideas could become part of everyday life, no matter a person's age or circumstances. When people ask me what they should do to find more peace, I always smile because I no longer believe there is one great secret waiting to be discovered. Throughout my life, I noticed that lasting change almost always began with very small choices, repeated quietly, until they became part of a person's character. I did not wake up one morning free from worry. I simply started giving my mind a different place to rest. Each morning, before I allowed the day's concerns to enter my thoughts, I would sit beside my window with a warm cup of tea. I listened to the birds if they were singing, watched the light slowly fill the room, and reminded myself that I did not have to solve every problem before breakfast. That simple pause became one of the kindest gifts I ever gave myself. Many older people believe that beginning the day calmly may help them carry that calmness into the hours that follow, and I found that to be true in my own life. Whenever someone said something that upset me, I stopped expecting myself to respond immediately. Instead, I asked a quiet question inside my heart. Will this matter to me a year from now? Quite often, the answer surprised me. If the answer was no, I tried not to give that moment more energy than it deserved. If the answer was yes, I waited until my emotions settled before speaking. That small pause changed many conversations with my family and saved me from saying words I could never take back. I also learned to care for my body because I discovered that a tired body often makes an anxious mind feel even heavier. A short walk, a nourishing meal, enough water, and restful sleep never removed every difficulty from my life, yet they often made difficult moments easier to face. Researchers continue studying the connection between physical well being and emotional resilience, and while I cannot explain every detail, I know I thought more clearly when I treated my body with kindness. Another habit that quietly transformed me was choosing carefully what deserved my attention. Not every opinion required my agreement. Not every criticism required my defense. Not every disagreement required my participation. The more I practiced letting unnecessary conflicts pass by, the more energy I had for laughter, meaningful conversations, and the people who truly filled my heart with joy. Looking back now, I do not believe peace arrives because life suddenly becomes easier. I believe it grows each time we gently guide our thoughts back to what is good, what is true, and what we can actually influence. And there is one final realization that brought all of these lessons together in a way I never expected, a realization I cannot wait to share with you. As I sit here looking back over more than 90 years of life, I realize that the greatest gift I have received was never perfect health, endless good fortune, or a world without disappointment. Life gave me seasons of joy, but it also gave me grief, misunderstanding, and days when I wondered whether I was strong enough to keep going. The difference is that I slowly learned I did not have to fight every battle that knocked on my door. I could choose which thoughts deserved a place in my heart and which ones could quietly pass by. That choice did not happen all at once. It grew little by little, like a tree that becomes stronger through many changing seasons. Today, when someone speaks harshly, I remind myself that their words often tell me more about their own burden than about my worth. When unexpected problems appear, I take one slow breath before deciding how much of my peace I am willing to give away. Some studies suggest that long-term stress may affect both body and mind, and researchers continue studying how emotional resilience supports healthy aging. I cannot explain those studies the way a scientist would, but I can tell you what I have seen with my own eyes. The people who remain gentle, curious, grateful, and patient often seem to enjoy not only more peaceful days, but also richer relationships with those they loved. That has been my experience as well. I still have difficult moments. I still feel sadness, worry, and disappointment because I am human, just as you are. The difference is that I no longer allow those feelings to become the driver of my life. They may visit, but they no longer stay forever. If there is one hope I want to leave with you today, it is this. No matter how old you are, today can become the first day of a calmer way of living. You do not need to change your entire life before sunset. One thoughtful pause, one kind response, one grateful moment, and one peaceful decision are enough to begin. Those small choices have carried me through many decades, and I believe they can gently guide you too. If my stories have brought you comfort, hope, or simply reminded you that it is never too late to grow wiser, I would be honored if you subscribe to this channel. Let us continue discovering together the simple habits, quiet lessons, and everyday wisdom that help us live with greater peace, stronger hearts, and deeper gratitude for every new morning.